Well, greetings to each and every one of you. How are you doing today? I certainly hope that all of you are doing just fine. And I want to tell you that I am doing fine too. I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to each and every one of you out there for tuning in today. I really appreciate it. And I would like to welcome all of you to another episode of TJ's Topics. Of course, you already know me. I'm TJ, and it's certainly a pleasure to be with you once again. I consider it a joy, an honor, and a privilege to be able to come into your presence on any given occasion. I tell you, it really means a lot to me. Now, today, I would like to talk about a little something that I think most people in the Christian community are probably a bit concerned about. They may not verbalize it as much, but I do know that a lot of times they'll mention it in passing. They may get up there and say somebody, especially pastors, and then other people who hold leadership roles in the church. Well, truth of the matter is, the church is, I really hate to say it, but in a sense, the church is drying up. Most people don't believe it, but it really is, especially here in the United States of America. Now, if you go to other countries, you may see the same trend. But let's face it, church is just not what it once was. And that is one reason why a lot of times you don't see too many men in the church. As a man, I have to tell you that church is not necessarily all that appealing to me like it used to be. Though I still go, I I don't go for the same reasons that I used to go. From childhood up to age 35, I attended church strictly for spiritual purposes, for enlightenment and edification and stuff like that. But once I got to age 35, and particularly as I faced numerous situations and circumstances at my last church, which was my childhood church, I no longer feel the same way about the organization anymore. I just don't see much of a purpose in it, to be honest. And to tell you the truth, I feel like I've outgrown it. but I still go because, I like to get out the house. I like to wear my clothes, and and I may have said this before, and I like to mingle with people, kind of interact with folks and stuff. It makes me feel good just to be able to do that. But there is a serious absence of men in church, especially in the black church. And so that's some of what I want to talk about today. My topic is more men in church means more money. That is what we're going to talk about. And I'm going to get to that point in just a second. More men in church means more money. Now, you may be wondering why in the world or how could I possibly come up with an idea like that? Well, let me just go a little something with you, and I'm going to tell you how I came to this conclusion. Okay, now, why churches actively seek to attract and involve more men? That's the question. Churches frequently express a desire for greater male participation for a variety of reasons, many of which are rooted in observed demographic trends within congregations and to perceived positive impacts of men's involvement on church life and the wider community. See, one thing that churches are faced with right now is there's a sort of gender imbalance within many congregations across the country. You know, most churches in America have more men more women in attendance than men. And then there's another reason why men typically don't attend church a whole lot. And that is, church with all of its, different rituals and different things that take place, the practices and the worship style and all that. Oftentimes it comes across as more feminine than masculine. And most men just don't see where they fit into the whole scenario. Therefore, they choose not to go, and whether that hurts the household where the men reside or not, I mean, that's really to be determined by the family, the wife and the kids or whatnot, whoever lives with the man anyway. But you know what? There's another reason why a lot of churches are begging for more men to show up. See, the truth is, church is a business. I mean, come on now, we may as well tell it like it TI is. Church is a business, and businesses require revenue in order to stay afloat. Without money, the business won't last. There has to be a steady stream of income in order for any business to remain in operation. Now, let's be honest about something. Most of the time, men are the breadwinners in their home. They usually make more money than their wives or any other woman. And so if churches were able to get more men involved, that would also bring in more revenue, which would ultimately be a huge benefit to the establishment. But if men don't show up, guess what? Their money is not going to show up either. Because why would they send their money to a place where they have no ties and no involvement? No real invested interest. I mean, and as men, we look for a return on our investment. And if we're going to give to any organization, whether it be a church or a charity or anything, we look for some kind of return on it, if at all possible, unless we're just giving it just out of love or, just because. But if you're investing in something, and it could be anything, you do hope to get something back at some point. Well, a lot of times men just don't see where there's any real benefit in putting anything into a church. And then too, men don't care to be told what to do by other men. Now you have a man stand up there in the pulpit, who claims to be sent by God. They like to quote this scripture. How can they hear without a preacher? And how can he preach except he be sent. Well, I mean, it almost sounds as if no one else can hear from God except that preacher. Well, that usually doesn't sit too well with most men. You know, men like to feel as if they are in charge. Most men now. Because, look, let's go all the way back to when the church first started. And this was supposed to have been right after Jesus ascended back to heaven. Well, you see how in the New Testament, particularly in the book of Acts and stuff, at the beginning of the church era, where the disciples and various others were instructed on how to go about setting up what we call the church. And basically, it was ran by men. Men were in charge of everything. Because remember now, women didn't have a part in any of this. Women didn't really hold any prominent positions or play any significant roles in anything pertaining to the church during that time. Matter of fact, the Apostle Paul, through the scriptures that he wrote, instructed that women ought to keep silent in the church. And if they want to know something, then let them go home and ask the husband. And for a long time, I believed that. I believed that everything Paul said was right. And I went along with it only because that's what I was taught. But as I got older and I started to look up things for myself, that's when I started getting away from that belief. So, I mean, now, if we're going to preach and teach that God is equal, that he believes in equal opportunity and that he's fair and all that, then shouldn't women have some say in things too as it pertains to spirituality? But a lot of times the church, they don't see it that way. But then by the same token, the church, whereas they want men to come, they'll turn around and bash men who don't come. And even if they do show up, they'll badmouth them sometimes as if, they don't count. So it's almost like you're damned if you do and damned if you don't. And that's one reason why most men don't worry about going to church. They don't want to be bothered with that crap. And who can blame them? And then gonna turn around and beg for their money, and yet gonna stand up there and condemn them and talk bad about them and stuff. Men don't go for that. Especially if it's coming from another man. They're not buying into that junk. So that's one reason why a lot of men don't go to church. So they'll never have to worry about there being a bunch of men showing up. And without the men showing up, there will always be a lack of much needed revenue, because most men do have good money. They make good money on their jobs and have good source of income. So therefore they would be able to contribute a little more than even some of the women sometimes. But most of the churches are being propped up by women because there just aren't that many men there. So, but it is what it is. And I tell you, the way it's set up, I can't see how church is going to last for too many more decades. Most definitely not centuries as it is. And this next generation that's coming after us, they're not falling for this stuff that was shoved down our throats. So anyway, more men in church means more money. But if the men don't show up, guess what? Neither will the money. So they may as well face it, because you can't make grown folk do anything but get mad. So I just want to thank you very much for tuning in to this episode of TJ's Topics. And be sure to like and comment and tell me your thoughts on this subject. Are you a man who goes to church, or used to go and don't go anymore? Or do you know men who go or used to go and don't go anymore? Tell me what you think, and I'll be glad to hear from you, okay? Thank you so much for tuning in. Try to stay cool, because the rest of this summer is going to be extremely hot. This is Taryn Jerome Harris, reminding you that every round goes higher and higher. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.